Hey everyone, so today we're going to go through a few of the basic suspension setup techniques. Most notably is we're just going to touch on how to set up your sag. So obviously these days a lot of bikes are coming direct to consumer online. So we're sort of setting things up from scratch by ourselves. Obviously the big suspension companies have got very, very good documents and how-tos on where to set up their sag specifically, and some even bike manufacturers have these types of information on their websites too. But today we're just going to show you a couple of the basics to get you a little bit more confident in playing around with your suspension. So yeah, let's rip in. So another notable thing is a lot of suspension forks will have a little bit of a air pressure guide. So like a starting point with a range for, depending on what your weight is, we'll compare that to the PSI that you want to sort of start with on average. So for this Fox 36, they're recommending for my weight around about 85 PSI. So we're just going to drop that down to 85. So at least we know we're starting somewhere in the ballpark. So today we're setting up a brand new Giant Trans X e-bike. I've had a little bit of experience with this type of linkage system and this type of Fox shock before. So off the top of my head, I know I roughly want to be somewhere around about 180 to 190 PSI. So that's where I'm going to start with, and then we're going to go and check our sag indicators from there. So our air suspension forks and air shocks will have these little O-rings on the stanchions. So they're not just for looking cool, these are actually our sag indicators. So if we push those all the way down the bottom and compress the fork, we know how far it's been. So that also indicates how much travel we're using throughout our ride. So what we want to do is get a rough idea of how much pressure we want to put in there, push those all the way down and all the way up on the shock. And now we want to compress the bike with all our body weight. So we want to be wearing all our normal riding kit. If we ride with a backpack, we want to put our, our normal amount of water and that type of thing, because those few extra kilos can make a big difference towards our sag. So suspension is very, very much personal preference. And sometimes bike manufacturers, or a lot of the time bike manufacturers will have a suggested sag for their rear suspension. This generally ranges from between 20 to 30, maybe even 35%. This depends largely on the type of riding that the bike's designed for, the type of linkage system, and the type of actual suspension that we've got in the bike. And forks are generally between sort of 20 to 30%. So what we want to do is sit on the bike. If we have somebody there around to help us, maybe they can hold onto the handlebars or hold onto the wheel. What we want to do is sit on the bike, both feet on the pedals, hands on the handlebars, and put all of our weight in the central riding position. And now we want to sort of just level out the suspension so our fork's compressed, our shock's compressed, and then gently get off the bike so we don't compress it anymore. And this is where our sag indicators will tell us how much travel we've actually used up as sag, or our negative travel. So as you can see there, without getting the ruler out, we're probably a little bit over that on the fork, and we're looking pretty good on the rear shock. So generally what I'll do from this point, I'm going to put a little bit more air in this fork, and then we're going to go and take it up to the trail. I'm going to throw the shock pump in my pocket and have a play around on a few familiar parts of a local trail that I know exactly what's going on the trail, and get a feel for, am I using up too much suspension, and am I not using enough suspension? Am I losing grip because my suspension's too stiff, and these types of things. But this is how we're going to get a basic sort of setup and wrap our heads around exactly what's going on underneath us.